Hi everybody, this is Chris. For this week's video, I want to go over part of a document called Debate Ethos, Becoming the Michael Jordan of Debate. I'm just going to cover a section on the difference between debaters and judges. I think this will be a valuable piece so that as you're in tournaments, you're aware of some of the idiosyncrasies that judges might have and how you can relate to those judges and convey your arguments better and maybe have some advantage in your debate just by being aware of your judge and what they might be experiencing in the debate round. So the first item here, judges are not flowing machines. In other words, a judge isn't going to be able to automatically record all of the events in the debate and flow them perfectly so that the right selection is always made. Um, Judges are just human, and they're not completely unbiased. So just be aware that even if your judge says they're a flow judge, um, be aware that they're not a machine. So it isn't just a tally of points. There's a little bit of subjectivity, even if it's a flow judge. Um, so the next one is, let's go down to second. So debaters, your whole purpose is to win the debate. So that's going to be your focus, is about the win. Judges, on the other hand, they're going to be preoccupied with trying to weigh both debaters, and they're trying to get at the right decision. Some of the judges will agonize about the decision. Other judges will be focusing more on, hey, how can I help these students improve, and what kind of feedback can I give to them? So they're less concerned about the win and more concerned about reaching out to the student debater and improving the performance for the next round and giving feedback or making an appropriate decision. So just be aware of that as you're debating, that if your approach is really cutthroat and aggressive, then the judge who's really focused more on the education, um, they might be less impressed with that. In fact, they might find that as opportunity to coach you. And so be aware of that and be able to make a connection to the judge. And as far as who that judge is, that's going to be effective at determining how you approach a round. So you can also be aware that if your case contains arguments that the judge might not be fond of, you can frame your argument and put it in a context that the judge is going to accept. Don't just read your case the same each and every time. Make sure that you're connecting to that judge, making that eye contact, using the voice and setting up the context to frame the argument properly. That way, your judge will listen to you and see your side, even if it's an argument that they might not totally agree with you internally. So the next one is sometimes as a debater, you'll see it as black and white. It's either affirmative or negative. The argument's either going to help you or hurt you, and it isn't. These arguments are not absolute. As a judge, you're going to see lots of shades of gray, and very rarely are you going to be like, oh, that argument is the only one that can be true. It's not like that. The judge will consider multiple sides of the coin, right? And they'll be able to see differences, and it's definitely not black and white. So when you're looking at it and you're 100% correct that your argument is absolutely the right one, you have to recognize that the guy on the other side of the table debating against you is also 100% absolutely sure their argument is going to win, and the judge has to select between the two. So somebody's going to end up being a loser, right? Just be aware that no matter what, your argument, as strong as you feel about it, that judge has to compare it against the other side. And it isn't always going to be an absolute. So a lot of your debates are going to be closer than you think. You might come out of a debate thinking, wow, how could the judge not vote for me? That judge might be really going back and forth on the decision. It might be a really close debate. Um, just be aware of that. You know, your affirmative case might match up well against somebody's negative case. It just might be the perfect storm, and that judge has to figure out who's going to win that. So just be aware that it's not an absolute. Just because you feel like your argument's rock solid, the judge is looking at that and comparing against your opponent who also feels the same way about their argument. So the next one, fourth. So some debaters will say that it's a weakness to admit that the other debater is right. And I remember going through debate and going through this and like, no, I can never say that I'm wrong. I have to always be right. And, you know, to concede that the other debater might be right might seem wrong. But if done correctly, it can actually add credibility. We live in a complex world, and a lot of the topics you're going to be debating have two sides, and there's an affirmative and a negative, and both have valid claims. Otherwise, you wouldn't have an affirmative and a negative case, right? You just hope that you always get an affirmative side every time. That's never going to be the case. So you got to understand that there might be moments when it makes sense to allow for your opponent to be correct and still argue and explain to the judge how your position is more correct. And even though they can be right on some points, your position is more appropriate, provides better outcomes, and position those arguments in such a way that the allowing yourself to express that, hey, that other person's point one is correct in this situation. However, and then go on and explain your case, why your case is better. Being able to do that just adds credibility, because the judge is aware that the world is complex, and they're not going to have an issue that you see the world the same way they do. In fact, by having that connection and having a discussion that the judge can connect to could enhance your position, your credibility. So the next one, debaters care way too much about reputation. You might think of that particular school or that particular debater that they're unbeatable, and you might walk into that round maybe being a little intimidated that how can I perform well when I've drawn a significantly better debate participant. And the reality is the judge oftentimes has no idea who the two students are and has nothing, you know, they're not aware of that reputation. And so you got to realize oftentimes you're going into a level playing field. There are no favorites when it comes to the judge. And then also remember that the way you act in the round is going to reflect on you and your school. And the judge is not going to be sympathetic to a couple of teenagers yelling at each other, just lacking the proper etiquette for a debate. So the judge is going to see your code there. They're going to figure out what school you're from, and word gets around. You gotta remember that the debate community is rather small, and you're going to be seeing each other around in future tournaments. I recall some of the best rounds I've been in is when I've seen participants improve either over the course of the year or from one year to the next. And those are the memorable debates when I see someone who in novice was struggling with Lincoln Douglas and then comes back as a sophomore, you know, in the following year, sophomore, junior, and just totally knocks everybody's socks off and is able to, has learned so much and has grown. That's really amazing. And those are the debates that, some of the debates that I find most memorable. So keep a good reputation because you'll be performing in front of those judges over and over. So let's see, sixth. So as a debater, you're going to go into each and every round filled with adrenaline, ready to go, looking for blood. On the other hand, your judge is maybe a few hours short of sleep and dragging a little bit and faced with the prospect of flowing yet another debate and trying to make another difficult decision on who wins. So be aware that your judge is going to be a little bit irritable. They might hide it or they might not. But in those situations, just you need to make sure that that judge is engaged. You need to be able to make that connection, that personal connection with the judge. So yeah, try to do that. Keep the eye contact. Um, follow the body language and try to engage the judge and pull them into your speeches and arguments. So those are some things that I hope that you can learn from and consider. Just remember that have good sportsmanship. If any issues come up, judge is another person. In the end, you're just trying to convince them and persuade them. And it's difficult to persuade them if they find you to be unsportsmanlike or, there's a little bit of emotional quotient that goes into that so that you can, it's more than just who won the most points. There's a bit of subjectivity regardless of who your judge is. So make sure you make that good impression. Wish y'all luck in all of your tournaments. Have a good one.